Welcome everybody to React Contributor Days. We're so excited to have you all here and joining us for, I think this might be the first React Contributor Days. So yay on that. And let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Let's see. Can y'all see my screen? Cool, awesome. So React Contributor Days, we do this event with Angular, Vue, GraphQL, and React, kind of as a way to get everyone together to talk about awesome things that are happening and talk about important topics. You know, I know a lot of you all who are on the panel today are all speakers, and you know, we miss that speaker room conversation. So I feel like this has been so awesome. It's been great to host other contributor days and just have people be so present and share ideas and information and inspire each other. Another reason why we do React Contributor Days is because, you know, we really believe that open source should be more accessible and it should be more open to everybody. So we open it to everybody to enjoy and hang out. Yeah. So Kent, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, it's this is a cool opportunity. I see a lot of friendly faces and familiar faces in this group, so I'm excited to chat with you all. Looking forward to actually seeing everybody in person. But sans that, this is pretty excellent. So thanks for showing up, and yeah, thanks for folks who are on the live stream as well.
Wanted to give a quick shout out to Vercel. Thank you so much, Vercel, for sponsoring and supporting our mission to kind of bring more awesomeness to the dev world. Also, this.labs, which is the other arm of the consulting arm of this.media. We're growing, we're hiring, we have crazy amazing projects happening right now. So if you want to come work for an awesome team, we're about 50 developers these days, and it's just really cool. Like I go to work every day and actually like everyone I work with. Like that's hard, but it's awesome. So crossing fingers, it'll stay that way forever. So anyways, check us out, jobs at this.co, or you can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet and just DM me if you're looking. We have a lot of upcoming events going on every month. Myself and Katerina, who's also on this call, and Daisy's here too. We host a monthly mentoring for women in tech. So once a month, you can come hang out with us, and we have different topics, and it's just an hour to just like hang out and learn from each other. JavaScript Marathon is an all-day JavaScript Marathon with free trainings. So you can check that out May 19th. Then we also have State of Vue, which is so crazy. Oh my gosh, all this stuff is next week. What? State of Vue is going to be with Evan Yu and a bunch of other folks from the Vue ecosystem, kind of giving updates on their projects and what's happening. Then we have State of Accessibility as well, talking about the latest and greatest going on in that ecosystem. And then we also have State of Angular, with all the kind of Angular projects that are important in that ecosystem. So yeah, if you're just like ever curious to peek in on what's going on in other frameworks and technologies, definitely check out our events. Just again, I'm one of your hosts, Tracy, so you can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. And Kent.
Hello. Yep, I'm Kent.
And you can follow Kent on Twitter at KentCDodds. Also, Kent, do you want to talk about our code of conduct?
Yeah. Oh, right. I was supposed to talk about that earlier, huh? Sorry. Yeah, so we're going to follow the React code of conduct. You can find that on reactjs.org. But yeah, basically everybody be excellent to each other, and we will enforce that if you're not. So yeah, be great. Yeah, so we've got a ton of people as panelists here. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time for each to give themselves like 5 minutes to introduce how awesome they are. So I'll just read their names here. And I will probably do a bad job. So feel free to unmute yourself and correct me if I pronounce your name wrong. So Christine Abernathy, Shruti Kapoor, and Brandon Bayer. Did I say Brandon, is that how you say your last name?
Good enough.
Is it Bayer?
It's either.
No, it can't be either.
The American is Bear, but the German is more like Bayer. But
sweet.
I usually just go with Bear, like the animal.
Bear. Oh, okay. That's great. Tanner Linsley coming at you from Utah, right? Like just up the street from me. Well, okay, a couple miles. And Juri, oh shoot, Strumpflohner. Nope, I can't say that. Can you say that, Juri?
Yeah, that's fine. Juri Strumpflohner. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yes, sorry. And then Katerina, nope, I don't. Can you say that, Katerina?
Sure, it's Skroumpelou.
Oh, wow, I love that. Skroumpelou. Is that right? Sort of? That's great.
Yes.
All right, and Ali Spittel, know that one. David S. Price, Debbie O'Brien, and Nader Dabit. And then we've got more. Another page of this. Tomek, oh, wow. I don't know how to say an L with a slash in it. Can you say that for us, Tomek?
Sułkowski.
Sułkowski. Cool. Love that.
Very well.
Siddharth. Oh, Sid, I don't know how to say your last name.
Yeah, it's Kshetrapal. The K is silent.
Oh, okay. Kshetrapal. Okay, yeah. Awesome. Really bad, but
I'll take it.
it's a great last name though. Jen Luker, another in Utah up the street from me. So good to have Jen on here too. Drew Powers, Adam Bradley. Boy, I'm like reading names of friends that I've had for so long. It's just, these are awesome people. And Colby Fayok. Is that how you say your last name, Colby?
Yep, that's perfect. Good job.
Fayok? Cool. I know I've heard it before. Radoslav Skankov. I hope I got that right. You can correct me if I was wrong. Romello Goodman, Daisy Nolan, Lenz Weber, and Michael Jackson. No, Michael would get mad at me if I made a name joke right here. So I'm not going to. Never mind. He's not the king of music. He's the king of remix and React. So yeah, we'll have Michael here too. And that is our panelists. So awesome group of folks here. And we're going to discuss a lot of topics over the next 2 hours. And so we're going to get updates from some folks on some cool things that they're working on. And then we'll get into some cool stuff of what is coming in the React world. We'll talk about state management, SSR and SSG, big topics in the world of React. Yeah, and it's going to be a good time. We will have a bio break, so look forward to that also. So we need those as humans. Eventually, we'll all be like, our brains will just be in a jar, and we'll all just be connected like that. We'll never need bio breaks again. But until then, bio breaks. So that's it. That's our slides. Is there anything else we need to talk about, Tracy, before we just jump into the topics?
No, yeah, I think we can just get started on the topics. I'm so excited for y'all to be here. Really, really looking forward to it.
Sweet.
Can Tracy, just some rules of, I have a tendency to talk over people as I'm doing right now, but how would you like us to engage in the questions? This is a massively, wonderfully large group. So what would be a good way to do that so that I'm not interrupting too many people?
Usually
I get excited.
I mean, usually we get pretty, it's pretty chill and everybody kind of respects each other. And so I would just say probably just make room for everyone and be respectful of time.
Yeah, I think it could help. Brandon has got his hand raised. Yeah, David's got his. Yeah, both Davids have got theirs. So yeah, if you want to do the raise your hand thing, I think that could work pretty well too. So before we get into like just generally talking about what's new and coming in React, the first thing we want to do is have a couple of people share some updates with what they're working on. Michael Jackson, I see you're here, but your video is off. I don't know if you're available. There you are. You look so great. So Michael, do you want to give us like 2 minutes on Remix? Just tell us an update of where Remix is at and Yeah, and then we'll move on. Brandon, you'll be next.
Yeah, 100%. Y'all can hear me good, right? Cool. Cool. Well, thanks for inviting me to be here. And thanks for inviting me to talk a little bit about Remix. So Remix is, if you're not aware, a project that Ryan, Florence, and I have been working on for the last year. Hard to believe that we've been working on it for that long, but we feel like we're finally getting somewhere good with it. And it's basically a React router taken to the next level. So people have been building sites with React router for years now. And we've always wanted to do more with it. You know, what can you do with a real nested router? And so Remix takes care of, you know, doing all the server rendering, doing all of your data loading, but even goes a lot deeper than that and doing things like, you know, managing the meta tags that are on the page, managing the link tags that are on the page, loading your styles for you, managing transitions between pages, unloading things that aren't supposed to be on the page when they're not supposed to be there, right? So unloading styles when you leave a page, for example. So Remix is this framework that just kind of manages all of this stuff for you. And the core of it is open source. The core of it is React Router. And then Remix is a paid framework. And so we're charging for it as a way to fund the project. We've got a great community that's going already. We've got a couple, you know, we've got quite a few people that have signed up already for the project and a lively Discord channel that where everybody's chatting every day. So yeah, it'd be great to see you there, and happy to take any questions about Remix or about the different approach that we're taking. We're even addressing things like, you know, suspense, right? Like full support for, you know, server side rendering with data and the hydrate step as well, which is pretty exciting stuff that we're working on. So happy to take any questions about it. But yeah, that's a quick update on what we're working on with Remix.
Well, thanks, Michael. Yeah, so many cool things, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about SSR and maybe even server components and stuff like that. Fun stuff to talk about further. So, Brandon, you're up next to talk about Blitz, and then we've got David Price on Redwood.
Cool. So recently we released a new feature for Blitz that brings static typing to routing and to your link components. And so you no longer have to worry about broken links by whenever you move pages around or things, because we use Prisma style code generation to power this. And so it's really awesome. You can check that out. We recently added analytics to anonymous analytics, same as Next.js, about a month ago. And so we're currently having about 250 new Blitz projects being created every day, which we're super excited about. And even though we're still in beta, we're already starting to see some enterprises adopt it. So Algolia, the search company, has not one, but 2 internal Blitz projects now. So that's really cool. We also have a huge US university going to production soon with a Blitz project. We're awesome. Also seeing a lot of more and more Blitz job postings and startups looking for like CTOs. Right now, there's a startup in our Discord looking for a Blitz CTO, and so it's a great time to become familiar with Blitz if you're looking for a cool job. And you can check out our jobs channel in our Discord.
I assume they need at least 5 years experience with Blitz. Is that right?
Yeah, probably. So yeah, we're really excited to get to 1.0, hopefully within the next couple months, and we'll continue adding more and more awesome stuff and making your job as a full stack developer easier than it has ever been before. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. That was a great update. Yeah, exciting stuff. I remember the first time I met you, and it's so cool to see the amazing things that you've been building since then. All right. Yeah, David, love to hear about Redwood. And then we have Lance Weber has an update as well.
Yeah, very good. And agree with that. It's been fun to get to know everyone this past year, even though it's been virtually. So Brandon, you're definitely one of those people. So Redwood JS is a full stack JavaScript, TypeScript framework. We use GraphQL and React right now. So front end, back end. Originated by Tom Preston Warner, so co-founder of GitHub, did Jekyll back in the day, became GitHub Pages. And the design impetus, why build this thing, was really to create a framework that would exist using the best of integrating all the tooling you need in the JavaScript ecosystem to do a proof of concept in a weekend, and then scale and maintain indefinitely, but also take advantage of modern architecture. So we kind of have a hybrid approach right now, where if you want to run serverless, if you want to start on Netlify or Vercel, that's great. Without any refactoring, you can switch over to traditional servers, run inside of a Docker container. So we see projects grow up really quickly because they can iterate fast. So speaking of taking on like an integration project on our shoulders, here's everything that we've built in out of the box with Redwood, and this is done. So we're still in pre-version 1, but a release candidate for version 1 is coming imminently. GraphQL and React has been fully integrated. All the data flow, we've got a novel concept called cells. It's like a higher order component. Also technically a state management or state machine, but I'll talk about that later. Test suites are built in front to back with mock service workers. We've got Storybook fully integrated, uses mock service workers. Logging uses Pinot, comes out of the box. We have CLI and VS Code extension tooling. Accessibility just got complete. More hybrid hosting options are coming up soon. Full TypeScript support, more security because GraphQL, and some internals are yet to do. And then we'll have a version 1 release candidate. So that's happening. We have some wonderful community projects that are starting right now, and we host meetups for contributors every other week. We love inviting people to come and participate in all kinds of ways in the platform. So that's what I'm most excited about talking about today. Thank you.
Excellent, David. That's cool stuff. Lots of stuff. You've been busy. Also, I love your hat. All right.
Thank you.
So, Lens, we'd love to hear an update on Redux Toolkit and stuff, and then Juri, you'll be next.
Yep. So, like half a year ago, we released the first alpha of RTK Query, and for everyone not familiar with it, it's like a non-normalized caching solution that's transport agnostic. So out of the box, we support REST, but you can also plug GraphQL or gRPC Firebase clients, whatever, into that. It works completely on Redux with a pretty declarative approach for the API, which brings stuff like automatic refetching if you mutate something, etc. And we ship with, that's new for Redux Toolkit, with an extra entry point for React that auto-generates hooks for you. So you just define your central stuff and you get hooks for every endpoint you defined, etc. There are also like one plugin for Angular that's been done by Saul Morrow. There have been experiments with Vue, and we have a few experiments with Svelte in our examples. And by now, like, a lot of people have been using it. We've gotten many feature requests. We got almost no bug reports. So by now we consider it essentially stable and have started integrating it with Redux Toolkit. By now it was like its own package. And for that, this is running at the moment. Like, the build steps are now based on ES build. We have a lot of new documentation going on. That's like the main work right now, going through all the docs. A big shout out to Mark Erickson here and to community member Shruti, who has been doing a lot of work on all of that. And like today I merged in like one of our last features, which is streaming. Like, you start a query to an endpoint and we have an endpoint lifecycle and you get streaming updates in that time. So we have like a chat example where you do an initial request, and while the component is mounted, the WebSocket runs. If you unmount, WebSocket closes and all that stuff. So yep, a lot of stuff going on, and we are gonna put out a new alpha like in the next few days of Redux Toolkit 1.6, and hopefully like do a full release after that. And we would really like people to test this, because at some point it will be too late.
Yeah, that's always the thing, is like you spend all this time like, here's go try this, do this, and then nobody does, and then you release it and everybody yells at you. It's like, no, you should have done it. Yeah, I feel that pain. I see a lot of heads nodding. We know what that's like. All right, Juri, and then actually Tomek from Stackblitz wants to give an update too. So you'll be next after Juri, Tomek.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Juri. I work at Nrwl on NX, which is an open source toolkit for monorepos specifically, but not only. Actually, you can also use it on your toy project if you want. You will still get benefits. And it actually works out also pretty well for open source projects. Like recently, for instance, Storybook migrated to NX and use it to power their builds. So the key characteristics is like we mainly try to help you structure your architecture. Like main characteristic for NX is like apps and libs, and that helps you scale it basically across multiple teams. And one of the main focus is speed for us. And so on the React side, we have a lot of integrations out of the box. We have like Jest obviously configured for you, Storybook, Cypress. Like we really want to have people just work on actual code and not deal with too much config stuff. There's also Visual Studio Code integration, which makes it easier to use NX with all the commands you can have, code scaffolding and stuff, which is NX console. And also probably if you want to get started with React and TypeScript, like TypeScript is a first-class citizen for us. And so we have like React with TypeScript set up out of the box for you with support also now for Next.js, Gatsby, and React Native as well. So the main, as I mentioned, like the main focus is speed for us, because like, especially if you are a larger enterprise and you have like long running builds, especially in monorepo scenarios, we take a lot of effort into making it as fast as possible. So we have like affected commands out of the box, which means you just build whatever you really changed in a given branch. We have also parallel execution of tasks. And the most like interesting things probably is what we released like last year, and are still currently working on some improvements on that, is the whole computation caching, which means like builds will be cached. So if you didn't change anything in a certain source file, that build will not be executed anymore, but just be guarded from the cache for you. And so right now we're currently busy improving the Next.js support, enabling like their Webpack 5 config out of the box also within NX. Also in the speed improvement part, we're working hard on getting incremental builds much faster as they are right now. And one thing I'm really passionate about and really looking forward to is what we release soon is distributed builds, which means like you don't have incremental builds, but you can also kind of distribute them across machines, which especially on CI is definitely very useful. And the cool part is you don't need any configs. It will work out of the box for you. And so, yeah, if you're interested, definitely check out nxdev/react, ping me, and we can have some cool discussions today.
Wow, sounds like a lot of really interesting innovations there. That's cool. All right, Tomek, let's hear about Stackblitz.
Thanks, Gans. So Stackblitz is one of those online code editors, and we've always been like super in love with how easy it is to start with JavaScript. You can just open DevTools and just start writing it. Then like the code editors, the online code editors started appearing, and you can now start very easily like with React, with Angular, with Vue by just opening a website and start like playing with it. So what was missing for a long time, and that's also like a big topic today, is the server-side rendering and the Node.js story. So we are super excited because we've been working on this in like years, like literally years, but we figured out how to run Node.js in the browser. So now you'll be able to do all the stuff that you've been doing with React, with Angular documentation, reproduction, all the stuff for all the backend Node frameworks. So keep an eye on the Stackblitz Twitter. We'll be releasing this next week. Actually, this is a beta, by the way, because this is like a huge revolution for us too. We still can't believe how this stuff works, and there are some kinks to work out, but we're like super excited to get you on this stuff and try it out. Thanks.
Thank you, Tomek. That's awesome. Yeah, Stackblitz is amazing. I mean, again, just, running Node in the browser. So all your code examples can be like fully running. It's awesome. I love it. Stackblitz.com. And before we jump into other topics, I wanted to introduce Christine. Welcome, Christine. She just recently joined the React team, and we are so excited to have you as a part of our community.
All right. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Tracy. So again, my name is Christine Abernathy, and I've been at Facebook over 10 years and recently joined as a React developer advocate, the first React developer advocate on the team. And joined Facebook more like worked on partner engineering side and did some other developer advocacy works in different parts of Facebook before kind of ending up on the React team. And so I'm just kind of like excited to actually just meet a whole bunch of folks. I've spent a lot of time on this last 5 months or so, just basically meeting the community, getting up to speed with what's been going on. So this is just like an opportunity for me again to listen in and see what's going on. As part of like some of the things that I was doing previously, I got a chance to travel to different places, see how React and React Native is being used in the early days when React Native was open source, Relay, GraphQL, and all of those different parts. I was part of the open source team there as well. So I had a chance to kind of see those projects grow. And it's exciting to see how the community and the ecosystem is growing. And I want to see if I could play some small part in helping out the community and see what the exciting things that you folks are doing and what else people want to hear. So I'm in mostly for the last 5 months or so, been in listening mode, learning mode, and happy to hear more about what's going on and hopefully share more with the community in the coming months. That's a quick intro.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we're so excited that you're part of the React team now. And we have high hopes and think you're going to do amazing things. So we're super excited to collaborate.
Thank you.
All right, sweet. Well, let's start getting into our general discussion about some topics. So the first thing we wanted to talk about just generally was what's new and coming. And there are a lot of things that are new and coming in React. And I just wanted to actually really quickly share my screen. Oh, I'm not able to share my screen. Just because I want to doesn't mean I get to. So yeah, let's see. Can I?
You want me to allow it? I can.
Yeah, can you allow it? Because I want to share something really quick.
Give me a second.
If that's going to take not too long.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, sweet. So if we go to unpackage, one of my favorite things created by our very own Michael Jackson, and go to the React project and open up the latest experimental version and check out the UMD, you can find a bunch of things in here that are exported as unstable prefixed exports. And what's interesting is actually when I checked this originally, there were a lot more of these. Oh, here we go. There are a bunch more right there. So we've got unstable stuff on the scheduler as well. Just a lot of unstable APIs this is like React's way of saying, hey, we've got some cool things coming that you can play around with, but we're going to prefix them all with unstable so that you can play around with it, but not get mad at us if it breaks. So I'm just curious if anybody in the group here has played with any of this scheduler stuff or these new unstable hooks like use mutable source and use cache refresh. I hadn't even heard of this one before. Use opaque identifier. I also hadn't heard of that one. So I'd love to hear from anybody some of these cool new features that React is experimenting with. And yeah, kind of to kick us off on talking about the cool new things that are coming to React.
It's all new to me.
We don't know what's coming to React.
Does that mean they've given up all the other stuff that we've been waiting for?
Yeah, like I don't, let me see, is there suspense list in here? Yeah, suspense list is still in here. So I don't think that they've given up on some of these other things we're waiting for. I
haven't used any of the unstable stuff, but for a year now, we've been using a suspense and concurrent mode in Blitz by default.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So there's a few people that have reverted back to legacy mode for some issues with like UI libraries. And it was mostly some bugs in React that I think are now fixed, the experimental build. But it's been amazing. And everybody, like there's been very little confusion or questions about how suspense works and error boundaries. Like it seems like people get it pretty quick. And I love writing code with it, using suspense and error boundaries instead of the if loading, else if error, that sort of dance. So yeah, I'll just give that feedback that suspense has been awesome for us.
Are people using it with data fetching? Or
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But not with Next.js.
With so Next.js supports this, but it's under an experimental flag in Next.js. But with Blitz, we enable that by default for people.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, that's very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Brandon. Lens, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I didn't really get to play around with it, but I've been following the RFC for use mutable source. Like essentially, there's this big problem with suspense and any kind of global state management, because they are trying like to let some information trickle through, but not all information trickle through, and not re-render everything, but just some parts and stuff like that. And use mutable source is like one of the approaches to do that, as far as I understand. The other approach to do that is essentially the use context selector hook, which I've not seen in that list, but I've seen the pull request for it. So these two things are essentially what we will be looking at least from the Redux ecosystem, when we probably like have to implement the next version of React Redux or something like that. And I think like every state management library, also all those caching libraries, like, I mean, Tenor, I guess you've also your eyes on that. That will hit like React Query too. We're all gonna have our eyes on those to somehow integrate with suspense.
If I'm not wrong, Lens, maybe you can correct me, or Tanner. I believe the use mutable source, the motivation for that is to improve performance, and use context selector. Maybe that's what that's more for. Can you kind of give us an idea of like what's the real motivation behind use mutable source and the context selector?
Well, you always have the problem that you have to split up if you really want to use context for state management. There's this nice quote by some React team member, I forgot the name, that it's very useful for slow changing and rarely changing state, but oftentimes not really useful for stuff that's subscribed in many places and changes a lot. Because essentially it's a dependency injection mechanism and not really a state propagation mechanism. So what most state management systems nowadays do is they do dependency injection, like they have their store instance that's propagating through it, and then they like subscribe themselves and handle subscriptions themselves. And this manual subscription handling is gonna completely break with concurrent mode. So use mutable source is a way to do this subscription management, if I understand it correctly. Like in that case, your store would be your mutable source. And the other idea would be to get a little bit more performance into context by use context selector, which would allow you to like re-render a component if a part of a context changes and not the whole context changes. Because otherwise you have a context with 3 items, you have a component that only relies on 1 item of that context. Another part of the context changes and your component re-renders anyways. So right now there's a high risk that you do one update and your whole application re-renders, even if you've done all the 3 times memoizing, wrapping in wrappers with use memo and all that stuff. Even then, there's this risk that everything might re-render if you have just too many subscribers up the tree. And that will allow you to subscribe more granularly. So that might be the first thing that, at least in my eyes, makes context really feasible to propagate state updates.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right, so we can move on from this, but I noticed one other thing, and that is I made like 2 weeks ago, I made a list of all the unstable exports. And when I looked at this, I was like, oh man, they removed a whole bunch of stuff. But it turns out that they didn't remove a lot of things. They actually, at least in the experimental build, they removed the unstable prefix on a couple of things. So we have use transition is no longer unstable prefix. Use deferred value is no longer unstable prefix. Start transition. So it seems like we are moving in a positive direction with React, which is exciting. So another topic that I think is, yeah, go ahead.
Did you by chance also look at React DOM? Because I'm thinking about batched updates, which by now we're all kind of using, but that's very unstable. And I'm hoping that that finally gets the unstable removed.
Let me see. Batch update. Yeah, batched updates. There's batch updates impl. I'm trying to see if it has unstable on it here. Let's find unstable. We've got a whole lot of unstable prefixes. React DOM is a lot bigger, so it's hard to search through all this. So I'm not sure. You'll have to take a look at that later, but hopefully we get that soon. I think that certainly is going to have to be something that we get with concurrent mode as well. So yeah, the next big thing that is coming that I think a lot of people are interested in is React server components. So who here has experimented with or has thoughts on React server components?
I'm curious to hear Michael Jackson's and also Brandon Baer, because you are both building, and anyone that's building a framework, you know, Adam or anyone else, yeah, with their thoughts on it.
Sure. Yeah, happy to tell you what I think about it. So React server components, I think, is it's an exciting, I think, a step forward, because the idea there is, how do we, you know, fetching data in suspense during the server render has been a problem in React for a long time that they've been trying to figure out how to address. The way we address the problem in Remix is we just decoupled it from the component hierarchy entirely. We said, you've got a component, and then you've also got a loader. And your loader is the thing that's responsible for fetching the data. So it's a completely separate thing. It doesn't participate in rendering. It doesn't, you know, we don't have to like throw and have the React render process, like do the catch and then, you know, render a fallback and then try and re-render. We just said it's a separate thing, and we're going to manage the transition for you. The way that relates, I think, to server components is, or at least our plan for dealing with server components in Remix is, when they show up, when they become stable, your loader, this thing that fetches your data, will essentially just be able to return either some data, or it can just return a server component, because the server components are these things that are designed to wait for data during the server render anyway. And so I'm hoping that we found the right primitive, the right place to kind of hook in there, so that we'll be prepared for when that finally does ship. But until then, we have this loader primitive that already, as far as I can tell, serves the same purpose.
I'll just add a little anecdote as a user of Remix. When React Server Components was announced a month or two after I started playing around with Remix. And before playing around with Remix, I would have been like so stoked about React Server Components. And I still am, but I'm like less stoked, because Remix solves so many of the problems that would have motivated me to be excited about React Server Components. And what makes it even cooler is that when React Server Components are a thing, then I can take advantage of the additional benefit just naturally, because Remix has it really well set up, I think, to be able to take advantage of that for like specific cases. So David, you got your hand up, and I'd also like to hear about server components from Brandon as well.
Yeah, Michael, thank you for kicking that off. I think you actually confirmed some of my sanity, because when React Server Components first came out, I looked at it and went, very exciting. We looked at it. I mean, the concepts are really interesting. from a framework perspective, we were like, okay. And it was, in looking at the implementation that they have right now, I also thought, oh my gosh, I would not want to try and figure out how to implement that. This can become spaghetti really quickly. Like the complication was really there. If I was going to, spin up, create React app and try and build something from scratch, I think it intimidated me. But from a framework perspective, we're already thinking about and handling the data lifecycle from back end to front end. And we created a cell, which we thought was a higher order component. Apparently it's not. But inside of a cell, it's a component. You're doing your declarative data fetching there. We have loading, error, success, right? We have all your states there inside of one component. You can use it anywhere inside of your layer. So yes, we have to think about the render tree. But for us, we were already thinking about caching strategies because we know how we're accessing data. We know how to get into that. So really, for us, the higher order of what are we thinking about is caching. And if React Server Components allows us to handle caching better, thus the data, then that's a great tool and we'll build it in the framework. Otherwise, we already have caching strategies we're approaching right now. So again, I think it's going to be, a win when it comes out. I like the flexibility and agility of what they proposed. I hope there's some simplicity in that as well, because sometimes those options can make it just more confusing, but it's not a deal breaker from a framework perspective. We don't need that in order to proceed forward, but I'd love it if it made things simpler.
Sweet.
So from my side, I think I have more questions than answers. I haven't personally looked into it or done much with it yet. But from my understanding, server components is simply an optimization, and it's not like going to fundamentally change how we build React apps. It's just one way to optimize some things. One thing I think maybe some of you can confirm it. My understanding is that a server component, you cannot have a server component inside as a child of a client component. Like your server component has to be the top level. Is that correct? Right?
As far as I can tell, yeah, that's right.
Okay. So it seems to me like it would be much more useful if you could have a server component as a child of a client component, so that you can like have your static shell or whatever, but then you can have certain pieces nested inside your application that uses a server component for loading some data or whatever it needs there. So I'm a little bit up in the air about what's it going to look like. I'm mainly letting the Next.js team figure that out, and then we'll inherit the fruit of their labors.
Yes, open source at its finest. Tanner, I noticed you unmuted. Did you have something to add?
You guessed right. No, I was just going to say, I think the challenge is around some of the reasons why they haven't allowed server components inside of client components is a lot of the move of server components is to just avoid completely, the waterfall effect that everyone becomes familiar with eventually if you're building any front-end application. And we're all trying to get away from that, right? And there's different solutions to that. But putting a server component inside of a client component potentially opens up the possibility for waterfall, just as a design, like an API design decision. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're staying away from that. And that's also one of the reasons that tools like Remix and Next are going to be able to design around that, because React has very strict contracts on what they're going to allow, but Next and Remix and tools like that are going to be able to skirt that if they can put more guarantees in place, opinions in place that React itself wouldn't be able to have, but these tools will. So I suspect you're going to see more server components are probably going to manifest themselves in your lives more than not in these tools and not like in the core React experience. You're going to consume the benefits of server components through a framework that has wrangled in the extreme ultimate power and made it easily consumable.
Yeah, I think that's the same for a lot of things. That's one of the things I love about React is that it gives us the right primitives, and then we build things on top of those primitives. Yeah, makes it so that consumers don't have to deal with the primitives as much, which I think is cool. So we're coming down on our first section here. We're going to move on to state management soon, but we did get a question on YouTube that I thought was a pretty interesting one I want to make sure we talk about. And the question is there any talk about doing error boundaries for the server? And I'd love to hear from anybody who has thoughts on server side kind of error boundary, like you're rendering the thing and something throws an error. How do you do an error boundary when it's a server side?
I guess I'll talk about that. How we did that, how we handled that in Remix, is we have we call it the component did catch emulator. It's for the server render, right? Because on the client, it automatically happens. You throw and you have an error boundary and React just takes care of it for you. But on the server, how does that work? And so what we have is, and it all comes down to nested routing. React Router, part of the coolest thing by far about the library is that you have these nested routes. And so we actually know, we divide up your page into like these little sections. So you've got like the outer sort of chrome of the page, and then you've got like the navigation, that's another route, and then you've got some detail view or some master detail view or something, and those are all routes on the page. So every section of the page has its own like data loading and styling, and they also have their own error handling. And so along with every route on the page, you can define an error boundary specifically for that route. So on the server render, if we go to render a route and it errors, we can catch it, and then we'll put it on this emulator thing, and then we'll actually serialize it, send it over the wire. So when you're doing the client side render, we will rethrow that error at the exact same spot for the exact same route. So you'll be able to see like, oh, like there was an error. It's not just like the whole page blew up. Like the outer two routes actually rendered okay, but there was an error when I rendered, this inner child route. And so it's just kind of a little trick that we do with the routes and this little emulator thing. But I think it actually works out pretty well in practice.
Yeah, it might be nice to have a little bit more support on the React side if possible, but I don't know if that is possible.
Yeah, sorry, we're just a framework.
Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on server-side error boundaries?
I just think that's a great question. And just, Michael, that's a really elegant solution. Error handling in a framework is such a pain. And I don't know my audience, but I could add some adjectives to that. So anyway, trying to get all the errors in the same place and understandable, that's a Herculean feat. So when someone figures that out, please let us all know.
Cool. All right. I think that that wraps up our what's new, what's coming stuff here. Let's move on to state management. This one's great. Everybody loves talking about state management. We've got 30 minutes to talk about state management. So yeah, I honestly don't have a lead into this. There's no segue getting us into this subject. So I'll just open it up as a general why question. Why is state management such a, like, when I mentioned it, I saw a lot of smiles on people's faces and like knowing nods. Like, why is state management such a challenging problem for React or just development in general?
Because there's no prescriptive way to do it. Every single app seems to need its own version, its own depth, its own complexity, and there's really no simple, elegant way for every app to have the same sort of state management, which means no matter when you're starting or where you're entering, you're going to have to figure out your own custom tools for it. And there are some that help, there are some that hinder, and there are some that will hinder in this one and help in others. And because of that, it's always a challenge of trying to identify what's going to work best for this portion of the code and implementing those tools for that piece. So state management is not a simple question, and there is not a simple answer.
Absolutely. So I don't know if, so we've got 3 people with their hands up and they're in a specific order for me, and I don't know if it's the same for you. So I will call on everybody to keep things steady, and I'll just go in order as it is for me. So Lenz, you're up here first.
I think state management, especially in React, is such a big thing, one for historical reasons and one for educational reasons. Like historically, there haven't been very many popular like data fetching libraries around and stuff like that. So if you wanted to download a little bit of data, then you Googled that and you found state management. Like you found tutorials that taught you how to do it with local state. You found tutorials how to do it with Redux, with MobX. If people started comparing all their state management solutions, 90% of the time they talked about doing a very specialized task that could easily be abstracted with state management. So like, I think it's the big thing because hooks haven't been around for a long time, and only with hooks, all those cool libraries really got traction, like React Query, like Apollo, like Urkel. All those haven't been in there, and nowadays, if you still Google how to do a download or how to fetch data, you'll probably land in one of the old tutorials and still try to learn that old stuff that probably isn't the right tool. And then, of course, yes, state management is still an important topic and everything, but for the special state of your application and not for the state that's easily abstracted and where there are already tools. So I think mainly people don't know all the tools that are available, or just land on the wrong block entry, go into a rabbit hole of stuff and have bought too much into it to really change out of their own solution in the end.
Yeah, thank you for that. Romelo, is it Romeo or Romello?
It's Romello.
Romello, okay, cool.
Yeah, no, I think I think everything we said is kind of true, but I also think it's more of a social issue of looking for a silver bullet when really it comes down to socializing and understanding and clearly articulating your state management solution. I think like we're at a place now where like there's enough solutions to where we can all get up and start and solve 99% of our problems. But when you come to scaling, it's really how do you communicate the current state of the scale of your state management solution to everyone in the code base as it evolves over like a year or 2 years later. I think that like we're all trying to solve that from like a technical standpoint, when really it's like with better documentation, you could probably scale any state solution to meet probably every like use case you can think of for the most part.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think that sometimes we overthink state management and we're just like, we have to have the perfect end all be all solution, and that doesn't really exist. And most solutions can cover 90% of use cases. So, and it ends up being a matter of preference. You know, sometimes you can hold the tool wrong and cut your fingers off. But yeah, David, I'd love to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah, sure. So my answer is actually going to be a combination of those two answers. Both there's the tooling perspective and there's the social perspective, but there's also, so React operates as UI is a function of states, meaning that when state changes, the UI changes. And, you know, React has reveled in this simplicity for such a long time. However, the problem is that answering the question of how that state changes, when it changes, how it could change, that's something that's completely glossed over by React. And it's something that they're really leaving to us to try to invent or, you know, reinvent. And so full disclosure, you know, I'm the author of XState, but I'm not going to talk about, oh, you should use XState for everything. More what I'm trying to promote is using state modeling. So understanding that state management is only half of the solution. State management is just how nice of a box do you want, you know, to put your state in. What's also important is state orchestration, how your state could change over time. What are the possible states that your application can be in? And honestly, this actually becomes a collaborative social issue. This is something that you should be talking to your designers, project managers on. mapping user flows and user stories directly to state transition diagrams or state machines, or just like any sort of diagram where you could directly translate stats to code. And what ends up happening is that as developers, we're looking for the easiest way possible. So we're putting logic and event handlers and just places where it's really disorganized. So my simple solution to all of this is just to have a conscious discussion about how your state should be modeled, more than just what should our state be, but how our state could change over time.
It sounds like you just want to be really intentional about everything. Goodness. I think that's really good advice, just in general too. We've got our other David. Sorry, David P. And David
that's all right. Well, you said David, so then I started thinking, and then I'm like, oh, okay. And by the way, man, how fun! Like these are all the tools we talk about every week. So anyway, so thank you all. What a wonderful community to be participating in. Again, we can question my sanity, but let me tell you about the state of the conversations talking about state inside of Redwood over the last year. We've been about a year with a publicly workable thing we announced in 2020 of March, but everyone wanted to know how we're handling state. March, April 2020, that was the talk on the conversations. What are you using? Is it Redux, right? Named all the things. And we didn't have an answer. We wanted to be agnostic at that level. Come midsummer of last year, people just stopped asking. And now it's a topic, but it's more of where do we need to go when we think about performance and optimization. And I think the reason is, and David, this is why I wanted to jump off of what you said. When you have the foundational layers in place and people can get up and running, and they don't have to think about more advanced cases out of the box because they know the building blocks are in place, so that then when they need to, they could be agile, try things, experiment, and iterate, and the decision fatigue up front doesn't weigh them down from getting started. It's not a problem anymore. Now, granted, state is definitely a thing, and there's overhead to it, but people are getting really far before they have to think about complex cases of state. And with a framework that you can expect things to be handled a certain way, they know that they can iterate if they need to. And I think that's been the advantage so far. But we are, currently we're looking at some experiments with Redux. We talked about XState, we're looking at RTK query, but all of those are more like optimization strategies and possible add-ons for people. So anyway, state hasn't been a big issue as of late. And I don't, and that's where I question my sanity. Maybe I'm just not paying attention, because I know when you talk about React, state is the top 3 things that comes up.
I actually agree with you a lot. I found that when using frameworks that are thoughtful about this, there are a lot of things that you don't have to think about until you get to, oh, I'm building a complex, like I was building an audio recorder little app, and that was like, oh yeah, naturally I'm going to grab XState for that. Like that's obvious. But where Remix handle, because I'm building with Remix, but lots of the frameworks handle all of the interacting with backend and hitting APIs and different things like that. I don't have to, it's not the first thing I need to think about. It's like, okay, how do I handle the pending state and whatever, like that's all handled by the framework for me. So I think hopefully we can move on from the simple state problems that are kind of handled for us by things like React Query or frameworks. And we can move on to now let's handle the more complicated state stuff.
Yeah, and real quick, a lot of people jump in, but I will say use hooks, context, even what Apollo did, and I don't think it's perfect, but the client, all those things did start to feel like they were playing nicely together, and you could push off some of the complex decision-making till a little bit later, but I'll let some other people jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead. We had a couple hands raised and lowered. Jen, yours is still up though.
Awesome. I think the additional aspect that people tend to forget when having the state conversation and how you're handling state is not just React will handle the displaying of that state, but then how are we going to handle the accessibility aspects that come with that adjustments of state? So when the state changes and it changes multiple aspects of the app that you're looking at the moment, where does the focus go? How are you moving through it? What's the most important piece? So state becomes even more complicated, not just because we're trying to handle it, but we're also trying to handle the adjusting presentations and making that as accessible as possible.
Leave it to Jen to bring up the accessibility argument there. Thank you, Jen, for bringing that up. So another question I wanted to pose to the group is categorization of state. I found that my state management has been made drastically simpler when I started thinking about state in specific domains of the types of state. We've got UI state, we've got server state, and I'd just love to hear what people think about like different state categories and how you organize that sort of thing to just simplify management of state in general. Go for it, Dave. Piano.
Sorry, I'm being a good citizen and putting my hand and stuff. So to me, and I know that there's a lot of different answers. I'm thinking immediately about the, I think Jed Watson actually made a conference talk about just the different types of states. But to me, there's basically two types. There's, and I know this is very state machine-like, but there's finite and extended or infinite state. So one is qualitative. Finite state is like a behavior. For example, I could be asleep, I could be awake. It's a quality, it's something where it determines my behavior. And quantitative can be something where, or like extended state, which is quantitative, it could be something like, you know, what's the time of day, how tall are you, etc. Like something that doesn't necessarily affect your behavior. So obviously you're going to behave differently to events when you're asleep or awake. And so this is, I guess, more philosophical because, you know, there's definitely server, UI, state, etc. But everything can really be categorized in a very broad sense as like those two things. It's either affecting your behavior or it's a quantitative aspect. Everything, you know, is communicated via events. So that's just my general perspective.
Cool. Anyone else have thoughts on this? So we do have a question from YouTube, but if somebody wanted to comment on this and before, we've got time. Kobe, I've seen you unmute yourself a couple of times. Go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna just mention, as far as like buckets of types of data is concerned, I think it's important to also not try to over optimize too early, because you might kind of shoot yourself in the foot if you split your state up into a ton of different categories that might not make sense once you get further into the application development.
Oh yeah, I'm the one choosing. Sorry. Go ahead, Lens. I think you were next.
Yeah, I think like there's also like the aspect of the source. Like, am I really handling state here, or am I really just echoing it? Like routing state, for example. Many people try to take the routing state and manually copy that into their manual state management, and synchronizing that is really a pain. So I personally don't know why people are doing that, but there are libraries for that. People are spending a lot of time with that instead of just leaving that one source of state that already exists, that's already in React, that's your React router, and just leaving it there. Then there's like, of course, like other categories like server state, we've had form state. All those have like very good solutions and you don't have to reinvent those. And only if you go beyond those, then you really need to think a lot about global state management. And then you need to look into all those things. So I would just like say, look at the big things first and then see if you need it at all. And if you have a good case, then there are great tools for that.
Yeah, that was actually really, really great. And Michael, I'm guessing that you wanted to just piggyback off of that. And Tanner, I do still want to hear what you had to add, but Michael, what did you want to say there?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Lens. That was very well said. People have been asking me for years, like, why can't I just have like the current state of the URL in my Redux store? And it really comes back to accessibility. It really comes back to, we've been talking about like, don't break the back button for years now. And it really comes down to that. So what happens is, I'll just give you like a brief explanation for why routing state, or the state of the current URL or the current location, belongs in the browser and not in your app. Because what happens is there's a stack. And so as you navigate around the web, you click a link, an entry gets added to the stack. And you click a link and another entry gets added to the stack. And you click back, you don't get an entry that's popped off the stack. Instead, you just go back one entry in the stack. And so you're always navigating within this stack. And lots of times what people want to build is they'll want to build like a feature, like the most common one is probably like a form, where if you click back or you click a link and you're not done filling out the form or submitting the form, what you want to do is you want to prevent navigation. And so you want to say, hey, don't go anywhere. Or rather, you want to prompt them and say, hey, are you sure you want to leave this page? You haven't finished filling out this form. Well, the challenge there is that they've already clicked a link, and the browser doesn't know that you're doing client-side routing. So the browser already updated the URL, and the browser already thinks that page is gone. But you, you're trying to give your users a nice experience. So you want to stay there on that page. And so now essentially what happened is you're out of sync with the browser. So if you think that you know what the right URL is, and you try and force that onto the browser, well, now you're going to, potentially get that stack that we were talking about. You're going to, there's a big chance that you're going to get it out of sync, and then you're going to get it wrong, because there are a lot of things, there are a lot of different ways they could have navigated around away from your site. They could have clicked the back button, the forward button. They could manipulate the address bar manually. They could click and hold the back button and go back 5 entries in the stack. You just don't know what they did to navigate away from that page. So anyway, we used to have kind of this idea about how, and I think it used to be a lot stronger. And this is the last thing I'll say on state management is, props are read-only. We all know that props are read-only. And then your state, you have a set state. And so you can set it and you can change it. But then that state just gets passed as props to your children in React. And so they're not going to be mutating that state. It's, and so what I think about is I think about the state of the URL. I think about that as a prop to your app that comes in from the browser, right? Like, you really don't mutate it. You don't mess with it, because you don't want to break the back button, and you don't want to break the way that they navigate around the site. You just treat it as a prop to your app. That's the way that I think about routing state.
Well, and we should listen to Michael about thinking about routing state. That's great. Adam, I noticed you just unmuted. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. So with like Ionic React, what we have to do with it is you kind of have to consider that URL as the state, and that's once you kind of get that concept, is like somehow this tiny little string is going to represent what that app looks like at this point in time. And so, in the earlier days with Ionic, it was just running inside of Cordova. We didn't really care about URLs at that point. We could have the state represented however you wanted to do your state. But now that we care about URLs and PWAs and being able to go to deep link into any part of that app, it's really interesting to think of that URL as like somehow this little tiny string needs to build out that entire page. And so once you kind of get that concept of like at any point in time, you should be able to get that state from that string, that kind of helps out forming how you're going to do that.
The URL is one of the best parts of the web over native. It's shareable. You can restore the state of your app by hitting refresh and being on that same URL. You can bookmark it. I just love the URL and treating it as a single source of truth for managing the state of the page, I think is great. That doesn't mean that you have like a query string for every input that you've got in there and like the values of everything. But so there is some transitive state that goes away on refresh. But in general, yeah, I totally agree. We've had a couple of questions from YouTube that I'm going to scroll to find really quick. Yeah, so Matt Wood is asking, will client state management ever be a server-side consideration for either Redwood or Remix, or anybody else who's working on server-side stuff? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, or anybody in general. But yeah, client state management ever be a server-side consideration?
I think
you can always start talking. Oh, good. Get someone else talking. That's what I wanted. Go, Michael.
I'm afraid because I've talked too much, but I'll just say briefly. I think what he's talking about is cookies. That's the most common way that I know to get client state on the server, back and forth between the two. So, for example, if you're filling out a form and you submit it to the server and there's like some error or something, or you want to so let's say there's an error and then you wanted to get the error back, and display it in the client. You could put it in a cookie. You could also put the current state of the form, the values that they submitted back in a cookie, so that you could, on a full page refresh, if you wanted to rehydrate the form, including the values of the inputs, you just grab it out of the cookie. I could be off there, but that's the way that we're approaching it in Remix, is just building on top of cookies.
David, did you have something to add to that?
I was trying to understand the question a bit too, because I think there's a lot of ways you could go. But I mean, yes, we think about that all the time, but it's I have nothing intelligent to say. I shouldn't have started. Michael, jump in again, Michael.
No, I love to hear from you, David. Anytime you want to talk.
I agree. By the way, the URL props, that was very, I like that a lot, because I complain about the URL a lot, managing those things. But,
it's a pain.
See, you redeemed it. Such a Brandon,
pain.
go.
Brandon's got his hand up, but I'll just say one other thing on this question. I feel like this question could also be about when will the server be able to manage the types of state that we manage in the client? And I don't think that we'll ever be able to totally get there. There are accessibility concerns, number one, that you just can't do everything on the server side. However, one thing that I've noticed when working with Remix is that it's actually really easy to manage stuff I would typically manage on the client on the server side instead, just through using regular forms. You hit submit, it does a full page refresh. You have no JavaScript on the client, full page refresh, and I'm hitting my backend. It gives me some error messages and stuff, which I serialize into a cookie and send back to the client. And that will show my error messages and stuff. And so I'm finding that, and I imagine the same is true for other frameworks as well. I just have most experience with Remix, but I'm finding that some of these frameworks are enabling us to do more of our state management on the server, which gives us a lot of interesting power. And we're going to talk more about server side, static site generation, server side rendering later, but that was just a thought that I had there. Brandon, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so in the context of Blitz, the first thing that comes to mind for client-side state on the server is just your server data, like what you'd be loading from a database or something. And so we use a React query internally, which has built-in support for prefetching data on the server and then serializing that to send it down to the client. And so we're getting that set up right now, where you can have a use query hook anywhere in your application that's defining your data, fetching your arguments or whatever, and then inside of get static props or get server side props, you can prefetch that query, and then it'll automatically be there on the server. And so it's so it's using server-side rendering, but deep inside your application, which you can't do with vanilla Next.js unless you do prop drilling and stuff like that. So we're going to work to make that easier and easier. Ideally, you can just flip a flag or something inside a component and say, hey, I want this to be server-side rendered or not. But yeah, so that's the only thing I think about. I don't really want to, that's all I have to say.
Cool, cool. All right, we're just wrapping up the state management part, and we'll do our bio break. But David, you raised your hand. I want to hear what you have to say.
Maybe I do have something to say, which is simply, and thank you all. See, this is good. This is how the progress gets made. You don't want to do everything. Right? There's been this real push to get back to, hey, can't we do it all on the server? And a lot of times I feel like I'm talking like it's the late 90s, early 2000s all over again. It's like, we've got static things on the server and let's go get them, right? Like it's a wonderful model, but it's even more wonderful that we can do things on the client, we can do things on the server, and we're just getting better at knowing when those things are in sync, right? So I'm not sure where they were headed with the question, but again, from a framework perspective, when you're comfortable with all the building blocks you have in place for your data lifecycle, you don't start thinking as much about, well, where should this go as a fundamental. You start thinking about that from a performance aspect. And again, I think that's a great place to be. It just shows that we've evolved the tooling, we've settled on some standards, and we're handling these things a lot better. And we're going to talk a lot about caching after the break.
Yeah. All right, Jen, what's on your mind?
Very short comment in that the building blocks are important, and understanding those building blocks are important, but so many of us are either transitioning jobs or new somewhere or entering a new portion of a stack. So going back to what David K said was documentation, state machines, or any sort of visual aspect is going to help as you and your team evolve and learn and move and adjust and adapt. Because the difficulty with state is that we're hoping that the machine remembers it so that we don't have to grok it. So making sure that we understand it isn't necessarily as important as being able to know that we can look it up.
I think that that's a really good point, Jen, because we always recommend that teams use state machines because it makes your team more inclusive too, right? And, you know, we're all stressed out at any point in time, doesn't matter if you're a junior, mid, senior. So being able to reference something back makes it more accessible to everybody. And it also allows like everybody on the team to be able to contribute, right? Like maybe somebody can think about, you know, some complicated state, write it out, and then being able to implement it, you know that somebody maybe who isn't the architect on the team can implement it without screwing everything up, which is nice.
Just same name, but just to say, Storybook has been a godsend. So I don't think anyone's from Storybook here, but what a wonderful tool. We built it in, and it works with Redwood cells. So you're seeing all of your rendered states just by using Redwood. And then we added on the accessibility add-ons. So you get warnings out of the box. And that visual understanding to start as a starting place, it's just, when you start building a project, you're like, why would I take the time to do this? But then once you start reaping the rewards of like, other people can just come on board. Jen, wonderful. Can't emphasize that enough. Wonderful comment.
Awesome. So many wonderful comments. It's time to take a quick break. So we'll go 5 minutes. For me, it's 11:18. We'll just round it up and go to 11:25. So that's around 7 minutes. We'll see you soon. And yeah, don't go anywhere, but we'll see you in a bit. And to be clear, when I say don't go anywhere, I actually do want you to physically go somewhere. Just digitally stay where you are.
Phew.
All right, we're back. At least some of us are back. We're coming back. Good break. Hopefully you walked around just a little bit or something, or at least digitally walked around Twitter. But we're gonna move on to the second part here, and that, or the last part, I should say. This third part, so it's nothing like the second part. SSR and SSG. It was a big subject. There are a lot of folks here who are working on frameworks for that, and it's just a big thing. I mean, maybe we should like also bring in here 100% client rendered, because there are use cases for that as well. Create React app sort of applications. So yeah, I'm not sure how to kick this conversation off. Just like the last one, I'll probably just let you all get started on the conversation. But yeah, what are, let's start with this. I've always been of the opinion that client rendered applications, like building client rendered 100% just in the client, is easier to get started. It's hard to argue against that. You don't need to worry about a server. You can do all of this just in an index HTML file if you want to. Just grab some unpackaged UMD things and stick it as script tags, and now you've got an app. I actually have apps that I use every day that are built like this. Everything's in an index HTML, and I've got a script tag that just has 200 or 300 lines of JavaScript in there to make my thing work, and it works fine. So why is it that we take on the extra burden of doing stuff server side or as part of our build process for SSG? Well, why do we take on the extra burden of server side rendering React? Go ahead, Lens.
Actually, the answer I always hear, and I'm really not sure if that's true anymore, is like e-commerce search engine optimization. Like that's a requirement that's stuck in there. I'm pretty sure the Googlebot does all the client-side rendering by now, but people learned that 10 years ago, and so teams will be held to do it server-side for the next 30 to 50 years, even though it's not true anymore.
Actually, I'll jump off of that. I believe that is the case. There are some potential performance considerations with that, though, like if you're talking e-commerce, because maybe you do get to see the loading spinners faster, which I guess can be nice. But yeah, so maybe it's performance is still a useful metric for SEO, even though the bot is going to run the JavaScript. But yeah, that's true. The bot's now running JavaScript. Debbie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, pretty much performance. So that's the major thing when you're trying to build your application. Remember, anything client side, all that JavaScript is being downloaded, and that takes a little bit of time, right? Then it's fast, right? Because then everything just works. But that first initial download. So going static site generation, everything is done, everything is ready. So it's much, much faster, which helps your applications, helps the users be able to like literally get to where they want to go faster and not have to do that downloading, etc. Obviously, then you have like issues, right? Because you want server-side rendering on some things. And this is why I love the possibility of having both, right? Having like the static site generated site where most things do not need to have server-side rendering, but to be able to have that capability of 1 or 2 pages that do need server-side rendering. And for me, that's like the perfect combination.
Yeah, that being able to have a combination there, I think is can be really powerful. Like being able, I think that static site generation can be pretty useful, but then you run into situations where you need to have something that's rendered on the server, right? So having the choice can be really helpful. Michael, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think it's really, really important in this conversation to remember context. And I think that is so often the thing that gets lost when we talk about like X versus Y, right? There are so many different types of things that people are building on the web these days. One site that I really enjoy that I keep going back to again and again is Jason Miller's application holotypes website. I don't know how many people have been there. If you Google application holotypes, you'll find it. But he talks about, a lot of the different types of sites that we're building. We're building content websites. We're building, apps for like, to-do lists and contact books and email apps. We're building social media apps, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and, Pinterest. We're building, social networking. We're building productivity apps, like if you want to build a Google Doc, there are a lot of people have been talking about Google Docs actually, because they just went to like this canvas based renderer and they've been taking some heat from whatever. You could be building like the next, what is it called? It's not Sketch, but it's like the one that people do in the browser. Anyway, for like graphic editing, right? You could be building games. You could be building a website like Coinbase for like monitoring your coins or your stocks, or like Yahoo Finance or something like that, right? Like there are so many different types of apps that people are building on the web. And when we pit X versus Y, it's missing all that context, right? So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to say, what are you building? And the reason I like this holotypes website is because I feel like Jason, he goes through and he kind of says like, if you're building this, the ideal implementation would be like this, and the ideal delivery would be like this, So I think what you really want is if you're thinking about tooling, if you're thinking about, choosing tools, what you want is a tool that's going to let you build, implement the thing that you're building in the way that is optimal for that thing, right? To be able to build it and deploy it in the way that is optimal for that. I'll just make one brief comment about Remix here, and because that's what I'm working on, and we're keeping this in mind. And so we started the thing as like a fully server rendered framework. I think that's a great place to start. I feel like your server in a lot of cases can act like a static site generator if you put a CDN in front of it. And with proper caching headers, like your server is just generating pages, and now they're all being served out of the cache. So it is more or less like a static site generator. But there's, we have on our roadmap to be able to just, there's no reason you couldn't do that at build time, right? Boot your server, generate a bunch of URLs, generate a bunch of HTML files. If that static style of deployment suits your app, there's no reason too that we couldn't cut out the server rendering piece entirely and just say, hey, you're going to run this app, completely offline. Maybe you're building like an offline in browser app. So my goal with Remix is to support them all, even though we started in a place where I feel like we started in a place where it's like a proven model, this client server model. But there's just a lot of stuff that we can do with it, and a lot of places that we can go with it. But the most important thing I wanted to say was, let's just keep the context in mind, right? There are so many different types of apps. It's not a one size fits all type of thing.
Thank you for that, Michael. That's absolutely the case. Drew, you're next on my screen.
Oh, okay. I think I might have cut in line. I think Radoslav might have been ahead of me, but oh well. I can go real quick. Yeah. Kent, you kicked this off really, really well. Like asking, what do we statically render stuff? Like, how do we go through the pain? I think it's interesting to think about, like, we're having a lot of discussions with people about how the internet should be, which is like the discussion, we are qualified to have. But like the internet as it is today, I just think of like, just being out and about, well, in the time when you actually could do that, right? Like, you pull up like a local restaurant website, and like, it's just like things are just really slow to load sometimes. Sometimes you just can't get the information you want, not from these like really, powerful big applications that a lot of us build, but just like the common clay of the internet, of just like your local pub, or, like what a lot of people use, is there's so much stuff that is trying to be, built, like use these big scalable technologies for these like really simple websites. And sometimes that can cause things to break, or cause things, we've had so many good conversations about how things can come desynced, or like when you're using this big heavy stuff for things that don't need it. I mean, sometimes just static is just all you need to serve those simple websites, and it actually affects real people. And Jen and Tracy have made great comments about accessibility, about like how static, just that simplicity just is so much quicker for people, so much more usable in so many cases. I could go on. That's just a really broad sweeping statement. But it's, for me, the use cases become clear when you just look at how people use the internet and like the type of really normal, small, local websites they visit all the time. Like most of them probably can be static and it'd be better for everyone,
Yeah, thank you for that. Rostislav, sorry if I got things out of order, but you can go next.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I totally agree with Michael when he said that everything has to be put into a context. Like, for example, one use case for server-side generated React is generating email bodies to send to customers because the email clients don't evaluate JavaScript, at least for now. And just one thing to come back earlier about CEO, and actually server-side rendering is essential to it right now. And it's getting even more essential over the years. And I'm doing a lot of SEO work the last couple of years. And one of the things, especially which Google is pushing, is the first byte and the first renderable viewable content. And a lot of React apps, just if you just render like a blank page, they are not very happy about that and penalize you quite a bit. And for them, just seeing the initial UI makes a lot of sense. So for me, SSR is very important for search engine if you have something like this. And the nice thing about it is the modern frameworks, you can actually load part of it ready, viewable, active, and then while the user scrolls, you can go more deep afterwards.
Yeah, awesome. Adam had a little trouble with his Zoom UI, so I'm going to let Adam go next.
Yeah, I think I had more to follow up what David Price had said before the break. And I think it's more of an observation that we're in these different eras that we've gone through, so like 90s, early 2000s, it was all server side, and then we got into Ruby on Rails and Django and things like that. So everyone was so accustomed to that. And all of a sudden our minds are blown with jQuery and AngularJS and then React. It was like that we did a complete swing to complete client side and kind of forgot about this. And there was a lot of benefits to that. So I think that's kind of where we are. And now as the RESTful APIs and things like that have become, and serverless functions, things like that, it's kind of made more sense to host a lot of the stuff static. And then like of the little bit of data that we do need, do some fetch calls for the JSON data and things like that. And so I think we are entering this new era of kind of the balance, the sweet spot between both of them. And that's really, I think, what a lot of this topic is about. What a lot of the people on this call right now are inventing right now. So it's really cool to kind of be a part of this. But yeah, I think it's, being around the web for as long as we have, you can definitely see where this is this is definitely where we're going in the sweet spot of server side and client and the balance of the two.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that Zoom puts you in the opposite order. So now I'm going to hopefully get things in the right way. So Romello, I'm pretty sure you were next.
Yeah, no, what I was going to add, I forget who said we should talk like the idea of context is the fact that the missing context around a lot of these discussions is the fact that like our field is kind of geared towards working in React, like that is like the biggest technology. If you're starting a technology firm, you're going to probably write in React because it's the easiest thing to hire people in. We all can switch jobs really easily because we have this standardized set of tools. And when you build a standardized set of tools, you kind of get that standardized output. So we're all going to have websites that use React. We don't really incentivize to build static sites as much as usual. And if you're kind of like a mom and pop shop, you're just going to probably go on like Fiverr or like a job contracting site and pick a contractor who does web development, and contractors are probably incentivized to work in React. So it's like this missing context of like, you can still build static sites. We all can do it, but we all are working within these same set of tools. And like that has outsized influence into how everyday people start to just use the web, because as we start to have these popular tools and kind of have these sets of standards, like it becomes the new normal for everyone.
Yeah, that's excellent. Juri, you were next.
Yeah, Adam kind of brought up most of the things I wanted to say, because I think the sweet spot is to be able to choose now, because like many of us are front-end developers, right? And so like that's what we know and that's how we want to build web apps. And so that's the easiest way for us, at least, right? And so I've been building websites also with like ASP.NET web forms, like purely server side at the time. So now I feel a bit old. But basically at that time, like that was super simple, right? Like it was performing websites and everything, but then the requirements changed over years, and people wanted to have like that more kind of Gmail quick, like kind of behavior, right? Like more like desktop feeling. And so that's when we were kind of pushed to the client side, and cool tools came around, jQuery, AngularJS, and stuff like that. And I feel like I'm going like full circle now. I'm coming slowly back to the server side again, as like some people mentioned, like satisfying the core web vitals, right? Like we do a lot of performance optimizations, like those heavy front-end applications got that big. And now Google comes along and says like, I'm gonna like penalize you within your search results if you're not respecting core web vitals, right? And people are getting like really afraid of that and trying to optimize it. And that's when the whole server-side rendering part comes in, and which is like, well, I think it's so important. And for me, like the thing, like that whole circle kind of close. The cool part is that now, and that's why I'm excited about the tools such as Next.js and also Remix, like when you can kind of choose when do I want to have something rendered server side, which sounds super quick and works out of the box, right? Even maybe without JavaScript. But I also have the ability nowadays to say like, okay, but on those pages, I need like super dynamic behavior, which is really hard to get right on the server side, right? Which state pinging back and forth between client and server. And so that's what personally excites me. It excites me about those technologies. You can choose when you need speed, and you can choose like the dynamic behavior whenever you need more dynamic side of things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Zoom is messing everything up, but I can remember, I think Brandon was next, and then Kobe, and then Debbie.
Okay, so hopefully this will help some people. I'm going to make it very simple about how I think about what to use between server-side generation, SSR, etc. So number one, the goal of all of this, I believe, is just performance optimization. You want the page to be loaded as fast as possible for the user, okay? So how can you do that? Well, number one is does the page have private user data or not? If it has data that can be public, it's not private, then that page should be static, or server-side rendered with a CDN in front of it using caching headers. But static is the simpler version in a lot of ways. So if it's public, doesn't have private user data, it should be static. If that's not the case, if it does have private user data, then you have two options. You can do server-side rendering, or you can have a static loading page where you'd load the data dynamically on the client. And those are they both work. It's just a trade-off between, if the page is static, just a static loading page, then the user is going to see that static loading page faster than they would a server-side rendering page, but probably they won't see the data loading on the page until after they would with server-side rendering. So there's this kind of trade-off depending on what user experience you're going for, and the data requirements for that page. Is there a lot of data? Maybe if there's a ton of data, then maybe it's faster to be server-side rendered. It's just something you have to play with your page to know what that difference is. So it's not like one is like better than the other. It's on a specific use case, which is more performant.
Yeah, well, and even sometimes performance isn't a serious consideration for some people. I've worked on internal apps where the only time people used the app was when they were connected to high-speed internet in the office. And so like the thought of loading performance was, who cares? Like that is not a high priority for these types of apps. And that's why the thought of context is so important. Understanding like what is, how do you prioritize these different aspects and trade-offs? And so like in situations like that, it literally does not matter what you choose, because they will all work. And that's the cool thing, is that we do have these options. Yeah, Kobe, I think you're next.
Yeah, I think another interesting kind of facet of this conversation is also, it's not necessarily just whether you're choosing static or server side. I think some people will kind of go to that server side methodology because there's the scale of their application. So if they're generating like thousands and thousands of pages, they might say we need to do server side because of that. But now, because we have the hybrid approaches with like Vercel, where it's the ISR, the incremental static regeneration, or Netlify with their new service, DPR, distributed persistent rendering, I think it is. But now it's that kind of hybrid approach where you can still get static and have that same benefit of the shorter build times, but still get that, scale of the thousands and thousands of pages.
Yeah, it's amazing the solutions that people are developing for these problems. It's really cool. Debbie, you were next.
Yes, so one of the biggest problems with static sites is the word static. And when you go to a client and you say, I'm going to build you a static site, they just run away. They're like, no, my content is not static. My content is like dynamic and I want all these things, right? And people don't realize that actually static sites are not static. It's not like the 90s static sites. They were static. But the static sites of today, and this is why I always try and sell it to clients as Jamstack sites, right? Because then that's a cool modern word and then it doesn't put them off, right? But yeah, there's very little that you cannot do with a static site these days. And if you couple it with serverless functions and the frameworks that are available to us, we can do a hell of a lot. And I would always encourage people to build a static site until it meets the limits that you cannot do anything more. Now is the time to go server-side rendering because there's something that's missing there, right? And very rarely does that happen because you can pretty much do anything with a static site. And then you also have the simplicity of deployment, right? And I know Ali and Nader can probably speak more on the whole part of this, but deploying a static site is easy, right? And a lot of people just want to get it up there. And having to do a server-side deployment, that's for me, it's hardcore. It's something I don't want to deal with, right? I just want to build something, put it up there, have the world see it. And that's what your client wants as well. They want to get things out there fast. So yeah, just kind of stay away from the word static because it's a horrible word. We need to change it and make it more dynamic because really static sites are dynamic.
Oh my goodness. That was one of the things that drew me in really close to Netlify and stuff like this. It was just so easy. Or even AWS Bucket, just give me a place to put some files. I don't want to deal with deploying servers. Although deploying servers now has become a lot easier too with serverless functions that these companies are coming out with. Even compute on the edge with Cloudflare Workers, and AWS now has their version. It's CloudFront. I forgot what it's called. Maybe Nader can tell me what that's called. But they have their own compute on the edge thing. Nader,
CloudFront.
Yeah. So on CloudFront, it's pretty cool that not only do we have more options than we used to, but the options are becoming easier. It's being more commoditized, which is awesome. Kobe, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to bounce off Debbie's point there. I'm actually curious how often with everybody, when they're actually speaking to clients, those kind of details pop up, the static versus the server side. Because from my past experience of the consulting team that I was working with, we won't actually bring up those kind of details too often, where I would feel weird saying the word Jamstack to some of the clients, where we would just talk about the scalability and the things that we were able to achieve with it. So I'm curious how often people are actually bringing up those particular details.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Oh yeah, sure. I just wanted to speak to the point that you just made, Kent, which I think was a significant point because a lot of times historically people have used the cost and the burden of running a server as an excuse to not run a server. Servers are incredibly easy and cheap to run these days. I run thousands and thousands of requests through my server and I pay a dime, per month. They're so cheap and they're so easy to spin up these cloud functions and these servers. And you have services coming out every day that are just making it cheaper and easier. I would say cloud functions are on par with serving static stuff out of S3. It's that cheap to run some code, as it is to serve a static file. So if that has been your hesitation about doing server rendering, I think that excuse is quickly, it's going away. It doesn't exist anymore. It's so cheap to run servers these days.
Yeah, I know when I started with Remix, I was like, I don't know, I don't want to deploy my own Express app or whatever, but it's not been as scary as I remembered it.
Yeah, it can be intimidating if you haven't done it before. And part of our goal is to actually make it a little easier to actually do that. But you've got a lot of services that'll make it super easy nowadays. You've got AWS Lambda, you've got Firebase that sits in front of Google Cloud Functions. Vercel has functions, Netlify has functions. So, and by the way, these functions that we're talking about, in my opinion, they're servers, but whatever. We got a new word for them. They're functions now, but they're code that runs somewhere that on a machine that's not yours. So, so that they're, you know, our Remix server code can run in all of these little functions. So if you're, you know, we do, in other words, we do server-side rendering in these functions is what we're doing.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. We just have, well, we have no time left, but I would like to hear what Debbie and Lens both have to say before we wrap up.
I just quickly answering Colby there. Basically, like when clients, the problem we had when, this is previously when working in agencies, was that it depended on where we were deploying everything, right? So if they had like only a server up and running, we had to try and convince them that that's not the only option, that you can have this other option. So then we had to like try and explain that and why, and then going into pricing as well, you know, this is cheaper, this is another option. So basically it was because of the systems they had, we were trying to move them away from that old school style. And that's when it had to come up in like, this is what we think you should build. And yeah, server-side rendering, they look at the opposite. Well, what is something that's not server-side rendering? The opposite is static, right? So then they're like, we don't want static. And it's like, yeah, but it's not static. And then it all kind of like came running around.
Very good. All right. Was there anybody who had just like, really, I just want to say this last thing before we start wrapping things up?
I just wanted to add this little thing like deployment. I love it when a framework like has well-documented ways of just building a Docker image, because I can just throw that somewhere. Maybe there's even a script included, and I can just throw it out there, and I don't have to care about the rest. And yeah, like please do that more. That's amazing.
That's great.
Yarn Redwood build, Yarn Redwood serve. That's our Docker image, but agreed, because then you can do things. The two things I thought we would talk more about, and this will say, is caching, right? Because we talked about caching without saying caching much. And then also CI/CD, because I think that's if we can optimize those two things without the overhead of trying to make a decision on the front end of like, well, if I need to change it down the road, like I think that's where all of this topic gets sussed out.
Yeah, go ahead, Daisy.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think like going back to state, it's just super important to be familiar with all different types of like state management, whether it, you know, you're going to use class-based with, you know, the constructor, or using hooks, or using some of these frameworks. That way, if you get into a position where they use something you're not familiar with, at least you're, you know, have seen that before.
I love that. All right, Tracy, I'm going to hand this off to you because I don't know how we wrap this up.
Yeah, you are an awesome co-host, and wow, on moderation, taught me a lot of things. Like, by the way, we're going to go for this person and this person's next. I'm totally going to start using that in the future versus like surprising people.
I live in Zoom.
Yeah.
Somebody help me escape this box.
Well, I hope you all had you know, a good time. For everybody listening, thank you so much, panelists, for coming and just spending some time with us and lending your thoughts. You know, I love the React ecosystem because it's just made up of all of you and just all the amazing contributions and all the just leadership that you all provide without even being asked. So thank you so much for that. Absolutely love it. All these folks are also on Twitter. So if you want to find people and have conversations with them, definitely look up their Twitter handle. Everybody's Twitter handle is also listed on reactjsmeetup.com, where this event was originally posted. So you can check that out too. And we do this twice a year. So keep a lookout. Again, you can sign up at reactjsmeetup.com to get notifications. And soon we'll be having a State of the React Ecosystem, which will be really cool because we'll have longer updates from, you know, really cool projects. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.